Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. If you are wondering what our next interviews are, after the ones that are currently running, on Thursday, after the last segment with Rob Franek, which will air this Thursday, the editor-in-chief of the Princeton Review, Linda Depker will be interviewing Ben Neely of Revolution Prep. Now, if that name sounds familiar, Linda did an outstanding interview with Ben about the new digital SAT, maybe a year, 15 months or so ago. And Ben has been traveling all around the country speaking about the new digital ACT. And that will be the subject of Linda's interview with Ben. Now, last Friday, and I'm recording this on Sunday, so 2 days ago, I interviewed Peg Keogh. Peg is the Director of Education at College Aid Pro. And we had what I regard a very important interview. And what we do is we looked at missed opportunities that occur by students and parents when they're completing both the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Now, these missed opportunities can cost students thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars per year. We did a real deep dive on this topic. It went for about an hour and 45 minutes. And I think it's going to help a lot of our listeners. So that's going to run on Monday episodes as a 5-parter in 20-minute segments after the Christoph Guttentag interview on understanding how Duke makes admissions decisions. So pretty much that will run really throughout the month of February. Special thanks to the 22 of you who participated in episode 500 by sharing something that you have learned that you want to put a big highlighter out and underscore so your fellow parents don't miss. I personally really enjoyed hearing from all of you, and we got very positive feedback on that episode. So we're starting a new tradition. Every 100 episodes, we want to hear our listeners verbally share a tip, something you've learned that you want to share with other parents, students, and counselors. You don't want them to miss. I know what some of you are thinking. Stock, 100 episodes? That sounds like eternity, but we do 104 a year, right? 52 weeks times 2, 104. We never miss a week for Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving. So episode 600 will be here in 11 and a half months, and you know how fast time flies. So when you have that lightning bolt of inspiration that pops in your mind, just jot it down in your notes app or journal, however you take notes, so that you can participate on episode 600. Friends, we are really excited. If you're listening to this on a Monday, we're 6 days away from our first Counselors Connect meeting. And we have over 80 counselors who will be meeting on the 4 Sundays of every month, except for December. We're taking December off, Christmas, New Year's, for 1 hour to sharpen our skills and provide a supportive community for our counselors. We're also going to have a Slack channel message board set up, thanks to Michelle, where we can communicate between the month with each other and ask questions and sharpen each other's skills. We're going to have great speakers that are come speaking to our group, and we'll be able to have question and answers with them. We'll have small groups breaking out, public school counselors, they'll have their own group, independent private school counselors, they'll have their own group, CBO counselors will have their own group, and then IECs, we're going to have several IEC groups, and we're still taking applications. You know, we're like rolling admissions. You know, with rolling admissions, you become more selective once you pass your priority date. So if you're a college counselor and this group sounds like it could be great for you, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, go to the resource page. You'll see the last drop down. That's our application form. And if you have received an acceptance letter into our group already, look for an email from Michelle Silbernagel, who, along with me, will be co-directing Counselors Connect. That email is going to come out this week, so be on the lookout for that. Now, in today's episode, Jill and I will discuss a real concern we have in the essays students are writing. It's something that we see frequently, and it concerns us because it's a missed opportunity. Now, I know this may be too late for most of our seniors, not all. I mean, there's still about 400 or 500 schools that are taking applications past May. But if all your applications are submitted as a senior, you know what? The juniors, sophomores, freshmen, parents of juniors, freshmen, sophomores, college counselors, please have your students listen to the segment before they write their essay, and for any senior who hasn't submitted all their essays yet. Then we'll have the final part of my interview with Christoph Guttentag, Dean of Admissions and 33-year veteran of Duke Admissions Office. We'll be discussing Understanding Duke. Now, it's the last part of this Understanding Duke email, but it isn't the last time you'll be hearing from Christoph, because he's back for the following 3 Mondays to do a real deep dive on understanding how Duke makes admissions decisions. All right, let's dive in with my conversation with Julia. All right, friends, we've gotten good feedback in the past when Julia and I just put the mic on, record, and talk. And we're always talking, off the podcast. And we've been having some really good conversations about a few things that I thought our listeners would be interested in. And so for the next few weeks, you're going to hear some of those conversations. And this first one is one where Julia and I are like, yeah, we totally agree. And so why don't you introduce it, Julia? It's something I feel very strongly about. You feel very strongly about.
Yes.
You could talk about it as a reader on the admission side. I know how it smacks me as a reader working on kids' applications. Why don't you introduce it? We need to get the word out on this because this is just happening too much.
It does.
Hoping that we can stop you guys from making a mistake, which becomes a missed opportunity in your essay. So why don't you tell our listeners what I'm talking about?
Yes. So in this, I got to tell you, I'm like knee deep in this right now as people are submitting. I don't know about you, Mark, but I find that so I'm working at a school now where we're working over winter break. So my students are on break, I'm on break, but we're both working. Yeah. And the amount of time they have on their hands, they are committing this crime more than I've ever seen, because I think they're just left to their own devices on a computer and start reading things online. And the next thing you know, so what Mark and I are talking about is one of my pet peeves, and it happens pretty frequently, is students using their Common App essay or main essay and or their supplements.
Oh, they do it there too.
To really use that as space to brag about your extracurricular activities. I think I'll say this. I'll give this to students. It mostly comes from a place of you feeling like, how will a college know about me if I only have 150 characters, or like, but don't they know that this is important, or don't they know this? And I'll say 2 things. One, no college, no matter, even I have 30 minutes to read an app at the current school I'm reading for. And even I will not get to know you fully in 30 minutes. And that's pretty generous for reading time. And also
that's about the most I've heard anywhere.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's only because I do need that amount of time.
You and Susan are so thorough.
I think they switched it up this year to per application instead of per hour, because they were not getting enough out of me for sure. They were definitely.
You better not read for the UCs where they pay you per app you read.
Yeah, no, it needs to be that way for me. So I do think it comes from a place of you trying to show the admissions reader, the admissions office, like everything you do and the depth to it. But I will say this, it like often doesn't land well. You've really wasted a lot of important, controllable space. I often think it's great what you do, but it's very rare that something you do is not replicated somewhere else by some other applicant, to the point where it requires a lot of space for you to explain it. And also I think a lot of the times it lands pretty self-aggrandizing.
Yeah.
And even I've been arguing with some of my students about the verbs they're even using. Like I don't know about you, Mark, but that when students use an essay to brag about, or really spotlight, I'll say that. Maybe you don't think you're bragging, but it's probably
I'm really glad you
bragging.
said that, Julia, because I don't think that students would think that they're bragging about the stuff that we're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Spotlighting is a really good word. It was like, when I was president of the, and it doesn't fit the prompt.
Nope.
And it's like name dropping.
Yes. It's just
another one. Yes.
And I also find I love you all, but you're 17 and 18. I don't think you empowered the senior citizens of your town in financial literacy. I don't think you did. And great that you're proud of that. You've got some great action verbs for what you want to talk about, but really at this point, the colleges, especially selective colleges, if your foot is in the door and they're considering you for admission, it's because of your academics. And then sort of they've given a look at your activities list. They see that you're involved and that's what matters. And you spend your time in ways that are meaningful to you. And then honestly, I don't know about you, Mark, but to me, the essays are really the most controllable, best space for you to communicate your values. Not what you've done, but who you are. Great. Every now and then that slips in. Absolutely. That you acquired a value or you live a value through an extracurricular, but that will come naturally. We always say show, don't tell. If you're telling and you're really trying to shoehorn and or thinking like, oh, this shows my leadership, or like this shows, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but so many colleges since 2020 have included a supplemental essay that is something about being in a diverse community, whether that's communicating through difference or a time you changed your mind or questioned your beliefs. All of that is getting at your humility and your ability to be outward thinking and not inward thinking or not self-promoting or what do I get out of this? So when you're especially answering application essays, that's clearly a value to the college and you're using space to talk about what you did, then it doesn't really land well with the college.
Yeah, I mean, Julia, I agree 1,000%. And I also agree with something that Julia said. It normally comes from a really good place.
Yes.
It comes from a place of, I want this so badly, and I want you to be impressed with me so that you'll consider me.
Yes. And your parents probably want you to say it too. Like a lot of time, it's actually the parents I hear really telling the students, oh, you make sure you talk about that. Make sure you talk about that.
Definitely. And, when I interviewed David Hawkins from NACAC, if you heard that interview, if you hadn't heard that, I'd recommend you listen to it. It's on yourcosmonkid.com. So first I interviewed him on the state of college admission survey that they do. So he went through, and here they interview admission officers and they say what counts the most. Admission officers reveal what counts the most in admissions decisions. But then this year they also outsourced to the top company that surveys youth in this country to interview high school students on what high school students think matter the most. And then we talked about the discrepancy. And were the two biggest areas that high school students thought mattered the most that were way, way incongruent or completely over-evaluated what colleges think. It was extracurriculars and it was testing. It was those two.
Yep.
And so this reflects the thinking on the part. It's the reason why so many students say to us, like, what should I do this summer? Or,
exactly.
What program should I go to? And they ask it in a way like, because if I get the right one, I'll probably get in the schools I want to get into. And it's not sort of understanding, that very few decisions are going to be made on these things. And so it starts with an understanding that extracurriculars count more than they do. And it's really hard to say this because I'm not saying extracurriculars don't count. This is very nuanced. They do count, but not to the extent the average student thinks that they do in terms of being dispositive. Like, I got this title and therefore they're going to be impressed with me and admit me. So I can't tell you, Julie. Last year I had a student, love him to death, second time I worked with that family. I had 5 serious conversations with him about this. And he still just kept going back to it. Kept going back to it. Kept going back to it. He just couldn't get it out of his writing.
Yep.
I never thought that would be exceeded. This year I have someone who I've had to have 7 conversations.
Yeah.
He just can't resist the need, and parents are involved there too. You're right. Like they want to, and in one case, this person got an opportunity to do research with this world-renowned person, so they just can't stop dropping that person's name everywhere. And there's a couple of things that I tell my students. One is there are places in your application where you are supposed to flex. You are supposed to flex, not embellish and exaggerate, but positively assert what you've done.
Right.
The activity section is one. A resume is another one. Your honors and awards section is another one. And it's not inappropriate in interviews to insert certain things. However, the essays are not the place to flex. They're not. They're the place for you to reflect.
Yes.
They're about reflection on, what did you learn from what you did? And they're also a place to answer the prompt.
Yes.
Answer the prompt.
Answer the prompt.
When people do this, they're going completely like a car just going off the freeway in another direction. It's not what the prompt is asking you to do.
I know. I know.
And so what I say to students is so you're actually insulting the reader because you're almost saying, I don't trust that you read the activity section and that you knew what I know that's not what you're doing from a motive standpoint, but that's how it can land.
100%. I actually say that to my students too. When I'm trying to get that nuclear option with them, see, this is what I love working at a school is that when I get those essays and they don't believe me, I get to take it to someone above me and then they can read the riot act. But I really say, it shows it's insulting to the reader. I know you're not trying to do that, but also it really is insulting to you because it shows how myopic you are, that you don't like the amount of students who want to, or, I was fighting with some students about a peer tutoring program, right? And they're like, but then I did this and I did that. I'm like, guess what, friends? Every independent school I know has a peer tutoring program that was set up by students and is run by students. And then they're like, well, what about that I learned how to code it? I'm like, they assume there is a computer that you are using that you coded. They know these things, right? So it really makes you also look like I've not thought outside of the 5 feet around me every single day. If I feel it is important for me to use this space to talk about something I'm doing, that is not an appropriate space to do that in.
I like the word you use, self-aggrandizing. It's very self-aggrandizing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't foster the kind of bond that you're trying to create with the reader.
Right.
Where they were like, they really like you and there's someone who get excited about having you in the class.
Right.
It doesn't foster that. It doesn't foster that emotional connection.
Right. And I hate that myth that's out there hate is a strong word, as my stepdaughter would say. I dislike that.
She's wise.
Then I usually have a parent or student tell me oh, but I heard that this one admission officer also doesn't like broccoli. So if I write about that, then they'll be like, we have to admit this kid. I have this strange little connection with them because I also did National Honor Society as an admissions person. It doesn't work that way. In fact, you can even ask my old boss, Jess Lord, where I would be very excited when we'd have a gender nonconforming or non-binary or transgender student apply. But that didn't mean that every student who fell into that identity got in, right? It's not like, you're missing out on a way to connect with your reader because they also did the JSU in high school, or they also ended up founding their own cooking club or something. It doesn't work that way.
And keep in mind, these are professionals. They read all the time. They can smell this a mile away.
Yes.
You can sniff it so fast when someone is trying to pound their chest and say, I hope you notice, like subtly, I just don't want you to not notice my accomplishment over here. Like they sniff it, they smell it. Like you might think you can subtly name drop it, you can't.
Yep. I once had a student who like your student you went back 7 times with. I went back 3 to 4 times with a student, and they kept toning it down, but it was still too self-aggrandizing. They were a recruit for a college, did a pre-read, and that dean of admissions called us and was like, this is, we're going to go through with this. We know this is a good student. This is great, but this essay did not make us happy at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And nearly lost their spot at that school.
Yeah. I mean, I and this is really fresh on my mind because the 7th time I had was in the last 48 hours, and this was parent-student meeting, and I just got my firmest. Then I said, fortunately, I will give the parents a lot of credit in this case because I can like really confront them, and they at least don't get defensive,
Yeah.
I might have to confront them again 3 days about the same thing again, but at least they receive it. And I just had to say, like, you guys are paying me, but you are not listening to me.
Right.
You are not listening to me. There's one thing I think we need to talk about, Julie, and this is really important. We are not saying that you could never, ever mention something that you did as an example of, one, you answering the prompt and trying to bring out something that you're trying to bring out. And that's really important. I don't want you guys to miss that.
Right.
So like, for example, let's say you were writing on humility, it would not be inappropriate for you to say, I thought I was all that in a bag of chips and that I was going to walk in the 9th grade and I was going to make the varsity team and I was going to start and even be all this, that, the other. And when I got cut from the team, it was devastating and it took me a while. Then you talked about resilience. And so like, that's important because even in the sample essays that I share with students, there are examples in there of people referring to their extracurriculars, but they're in the context of, 1, answering the prompt.
Yep.
And 2, bringing out a personal quality that's winsome and it's authentic and it's natural.
Yes. And
people only have so many experiences to draw from.
Right.
And so if you say, well, you can't talk about any extracurriculars at all.
Yeah.
People may be like, oh, what do I talk about?
Yes.
So I think it's really important that you hear us make this point because we would be doing you a disservice to not bring that up. Julia's over here nodding her head. What do you want to say on that, Julia?
Yeah, just totally agree with that. I think, like, for example, a question about like, where have you had like a challenge or an academic or personal challenge? And a lot of my students, like who go the wrong route are like, well, when I was president of the student body, like it was really hard, like getting everyone to do what I wanted to do. And I had dreams to implement this, but no one did it with me. A better answer to that would be like, I learned a lot about how hard it is to lead a team and collaborate when I was serving. Like, instead of it being about, oh, I won this and how, difficult it was for me, you're being more outward, you're being reflective. It's about what you took away from that extracurricular that impacts who you are and how you impact other people.
Yeah. And I really hope that you guys will really take this to heart. This is so important. And we see this so often, often, all the time. And one of the things we try to do in our podcast is like bring you trends in college admissions. Julie and I are going to be talking about trends coming up here in a couple of weeks. You guys will hear that. But also just missed opportunities that we see. And this is a missed opportunity. And I see it just as much, Julia, in the custom prompts as I see it in the personal statements. I don't even know which one is a bigger offender.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's so funny. I'm like, how did we get to captain of the soccer team and founded of the volunteer club over here on this essay that's like that's supposed to be about. Tell me about a time you had a really difficult conversation
Mm-hmm.
with somebody. What did you learn? How did you change? Was your perspective any different? And next thing you know, we're talking about captain of soccer here.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else you want to share on this? You think we summed it up?
I think so. Yeah. And just very important what you said, Mark, just that we're not saying don't talk about extracurriculars. We're talking about being reflective rather than flexing.
Yeah, and you know one thing I noticed, all the students, they know that word flex because I'll say to them
Yeah.
every
Oh,
single
they
time.
all use it.
Yes.
Totally.
I'm like, do you know when I say when you're flexing here? Do you know what I mean? They all say
Yeah,
yeah.
like, oh,
I
yeah.
know.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. I know. I do feel for them though, because sometimes it
Totally.
just reflects how badly they want to get admitted.
I know it is. It's the same thing as like, I'm sure you read these essays too, where like they feel like they got to get a hook. And so the first paragraph of the essays, I'm like, what is this language? And why are you being so dramatic? And what are we saying here? And they're like, I thought I had to like grab the reader and I had to like show him, it's the same thing. Like you're really just trying to do your best and put your best foot forward. But you also have to trust a little bit in the pool and the process, and listen to your counselor because they're going to tell you what will be helpful to include.
I'll even go to a greater extreme, and I just had this thought pop in my head. One of the things that I always find fascinating to talk to admission officers about when they switch the other side of the desk, when they go from the admission side to the counseling side, is what is it that you didn't know? And so you got to the other side, and it's fascinating, right? You hear all of these things. Oh my goodness, I was so naive.
Yeah.
I actually think that one thing that falls in this category is this, Julia, because sometimes the way I hear admission officers describe like being authentic, and I think that sometimes they actually may not relate to the fact that it is kind of natural that if you're trying to get something that you're going to try to cater to what you think works.
100%.
Right? Like think for like admission officers will describe it and they'll just poo-poo it and dismiss it so much, like just be yourself, be authentic, do what you do.
Yeah.
But think about it. If let's say it's an admission officer and they have an opportunity to go interview at another school for a dean position or a VP of enrollment, some promotion. And it's pretty likely that they might talk to people in their circles, whatever, to try to find out a little bit about like what are they looking for.
Right.
And if someone just said, just go be yourself, that might be unsatisfactory to people who are trying to kind of get an edge. But the problem with that disconnect is it only magnifies it, because in some ways you could think of this as kind of an innocent error that, of course, shouldn't you almost expect that people are trying to get in, they might do things that might be natural of trying to get in. But because I think that people are a little naive on that, because it really bothers admission officers tremendously, right? When you're sort of doing things to try to get in as opposed to be authentic. I almost feel like their naivete that's kind of naturally what you would think you would do if you're trying to do something. It almost magnifies it because there's a disconnect. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think that this to me would be my best explanation too for why we don't get really great specific answers when you're in an info session or you're listening to a podcast of a college. It really is because I also think maybe not necessarily always naivete, but just this like there is no one size fits all answer. So this is the best I can do for you. And I will say I will give colleges credit for I've been in really selective college info sessions and there's that parent who raises their hand and is like, can I write a letter of rec for my child? Or I'm going to why didn't you let my child in? And their grace and the general response to me does sort of say I understand
you're looking for like a answer particular to yourself, and I can't give that to you, so I'm just kind of gonna be very vague in general with
Mm-hmm.
my answer. And I do think there is a disconnect between, especially as we see as counselors, like the sheer stress and confusion, and even some of my savviest families describe the college process as legalese to them, right? Like it I do think we all sort of can forget that like there's a lot of emotions and stress behind this. And so students are just trying to do what they can with a non-standardized process that can be very vague, right?
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. Like, this can be like parents can contribute to the stress. If the parents are saying, make sure they know about this, you've got to get it in there. That happens. That routinely happens
Yes.
where the parent is the one who's including them to include this.
Yep.
And so all that just creates pressure.
Yeah. And then I really feel for especially like great when we can have a family conversation with me, the student, but a lot of the time it's the student coming back and forth to me because the parent's like, and then I have a tough relationship with the parent because then they think, why wouldn't I encourage their child to talk about something that has been what they think is really impressive about their child, or what they think would get them into college, right? So it's not fun. So if we start with a reflection focused answers and essays, then we should all be good to go.
There we go. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Friends, I was talking to a very experienced college counselor 4 days ago. This counselor is a former Ivy League admission officer over 30 years ago and been in private practice since then. I was telling her about the segment that Julie and I recorded, on missed opportunities in the student essays. And I said it was be going live on Monday. And she said to me, Mark, it isn't the students, it's the parents. They're the ones who insist that their students put all of these activities into their essays, even when it doesn't fit the prompt. So parents, we know you mean well. Sometimes you want it for your student even more than they want it for themselves. But good intentions don't matter here because students aren't answering the prompt. They're not doing the reflection that the colleges are looking for. And they're wasting precious real estate in these essays. So now that you know, hopefully you'll be able to watch for this. And for you do-it-yourselfers, be on the watch out for this in your own students' essays.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in the final part 2 of my interview with Christoph Guttentag, Dean of Admissions at Duke University, on the topic of understanding Duke University, Christoph talks about the ways in which faculty take an interest in students at Duke. Christoph talks about the multiple advisors students receive at Duke. Christoph shares some of Duke's institutional priorities and where Duke is headed now, and he gives several examples of Duke implementing these priorities. Christoph answers the question, is Duke a challenging place for an introvert? Then Christoph answers the question, what does Duke need to work on to be an even better place? Then Christoph answers a question, is there a sizable cohort of students at Duke that are so wealthy that they are disconnected from everyday people? Hope you enjoy the final part of the interview with Christoph Guttentag. Listen and enjoy. Another thing I've heard you talk about as it's something you feel is distinctive about Duke is the way your faculty celebrate students, the way they elevate students, the way they love to see students grow. I'm sure there are a lot of people that would say, we all do that. So what do you feel sort of Duke does that may be distinctive in that regard, that maybe is rare, that you don't see that often?
Yeah, I think for a school like Duke, where the faculty at places like Duke, faculty careers are defined by their contribution to knowledge in their field. Like that's how you become a professor at a place like Duke. And my experience has been in talking with the students is that, and talking with the faculty, first of all, the faculty enjoy the teaching process. There are introductory courses. I mean, this actually kind of astonishes me. I believe the introductory economics course is probably the largest course at Duke. It's a lecture course of 500 students and a faculty member. And the pride that the faculty take in teaching a course that engages students, that excites students, that students look forward to taking. I've spoken with students that look forward to that course, that talk about how well the faculty member communicates, the care with which they take, the commitment they have to the student understanding. So on large courses and small courses, I've noticed this in terms of my conversations with faculty and in terms of students. I don't know that it's dramatically different than you would find at other places, and certainly at smaller colleges, at smaller liberal arts colleges. I don't know that it's dramatically different than what you would find at a place like that, but it's consistent from department to department, and it's an attitude that I hear consistently from students across the board, that the faculty are authentically interested, that they make themselves available. They're happy to talk with students, and they provide feedback to students in detail. I was actually just at a memorial service for a longtime faculty member and administrator at Duke, um, who taught well into his 80s and was legendary for the amount of feedback that he would give students on papers. Um, that they feel that as part of their responsibility is to help students grow, and then to help and to guide them and to give them advice and to let them know about opportunities that are available to them.
Christoph, I've also heard you talk about the advising that students get, like multiple advisors.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that for a second, for our listeners?
Yeah, and I think that I am. Thank you for asking. What I think people need to understand about college, certainly about Duke, but I expect it's true of other places as well, that while people have titles, while people have positions that they hold, whether it's a faculty position or an administrative position, um, when you're at Duke, certainly I'm sure it's true of other places, but it certainly is true at Duke, people don't see their roles as being limited to just their job definition. They like to help students make connections, point them in particular directions, so that a student who arrives at Duke is going to have easily available at least a half a dozen different advisors in different ways. There are current undergraduates who are advising. There are residential advisors, some of whom are undergraduates, some of whom may be graduate students. There are faculty and residents. Every residence hall on East Campus has a faculty member in residence. There are academic advisors, there are major advisors, there are pre-major advisors, there are advisors who help people with finding study abroad opportunities. There's an academic resource center, there's a writing center. There are all kinds of places where people make themselves available to students and be responsive to students. And the nice thing is, and I've talked with students about this, you may go to an advisor to talk about the specific thing that is their area of expertise, but once you start having that conversation, so many people at Duke know so many other people, they just start pointing them, and they say, well, you should go talk with this person, or you should go talk with that person. One thing leads to another, and they find the person that can really help them. I mean, there are cultural centers. I haven't even begun to talk about all the people in student affairs who are just so committed to the undergraduate experience, and who work unbelievably hard to make sure that people feel like they belong here.
Let's talk institutional priorities. Every institution has them. Some are probably pretty close to the vest that you may not be able to share, but some you can share. What are some of Duke's institutional priorities, say, over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think that I know I have a sense of the direction that we're heading right now. 5 to 10 years obviously is a good while ahead, but I do recently, I think in the last several years, uh, in various ways, Duke has made a very significant commitment to increasing the economic diversity of the student body, and we saw that in the Carolina's financial aid initiative. We've seen it in the percentage of students, incoming students who are eligible for Pell Grants. We see it in how we recruit and where we recruit. So I think that taking a look at the makeup of the student body, particularly with respect uh, to the economic diversity of the student body, I think in the coming years, I think we will see also. Um, I'm hoping we will see more emphasis, more opportunity for veterans to enroll at Duke. I'm excited about the possibility of that. We'll see where that leads, but I'm hopeful along those lines. I think the other thing, and we have already talked about it, is the curriculum that's really going to emphasize uh, um, giving students the opportunity to take advantage of what college is, which is an opportunity to think and wonder and explore, rather than just go step by step by step to the next goal. So I think the curriculum is going to be an important part of that. Um, I'll also add a quick shout out to the Quantum Computing Center. Um, uh, Duke has made a significant commitment to quantum computing, and I'll do a special shout out there because my son is a grad student there. So
Oh, you got
I've
to
got a
shout out
I've
the
got a
sun.
I've
I
got a
already shout out
personal
my daughters.
interest.
Yeah, got to do that. I know what that's like. Awesome. So Duke is social. I've had lots of kids go there over the years. I have lots of kids there now, and I also love to just plop on a campus and start talking to kids. And I did that maybe a year and a half ago with one of our co-hosts, who's a Chapel Hill resident, Dr. Lisa Ruff. You've got that nice little kind of outdoor eating area there. It's kind of a great place to talk to students. And boy, your kids were great. And we would just talk to them. What do you like? What do you not like? What do you like to see change? Duke is very social. So here's my question: Is Duke a challenging place for an introvert?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was out on the plaza by the Bryan Center and watching Duke students talk with one another, and it was astonishing. There were 75 students, between 75 and 100 students, out on the plaza, eating, drinking coffee, talking with one another, and and with the exception of the students that were on their laptops doing some work, everybody was talking with one another. Like they weren't staring at their phones. They were engaging with their friends. It was fascinating to see, and I've seen that consistently. So yes, um, Duke students who are social certainly are in their comfort zone at Duke, and I think that a student, the thing about a student who's introverted is they may see that and they may think, oh, I'm not sure that this is the right place for me. The thing that I would want them to know about is Duke is a place that rewards people asking questions and looking for things. And so an introverted student who takes the opportunity to talk with a faculty member after class, to see what's out there when activities are listed, and advertise, they will find a place that for many activities welcome people in. So there are many activities that welcome people in, that and many opportunities to do things non-curricularly that are um, well in their comfort zone. Uh, but you are right; it helps to ask, it helps to keep your eyes open, and it helps to just approach people and find your and find your niche. You can do that. You can absolutely do that. But you are right. The thing that people notice when they come onto campus is it is a talkative social place for sure.
What do you feel, Christoph, Duke needs to work on to be even a better school than it already is?
I think it's a great question. I think there are probably a couple of things. I do wish that there were more opportunities for students to fail at things and feel like that was okay. And I think that the places like Duke have a responsibility to normalize failure, if you will. And I think we do that in certain areas. I know that the engineering school, the part of being an engineer is trying things out and they don't work. And then you figure out what to do next. But I feel that we understand this issue, and we understand the challenges of having a student body where the students are experienced, exceptionally capable. I think finding opportunities for students to fail and for them to learn that that's part of the process. That's an integral part of the process. It's not a it's it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. And I think I think that would be good. I The other thing that I think where I'm looking forward to seeing where we go is in the area of arts and creativity and imagination. I think that over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a great commitment to the arts at Duke. I really am hoping and expecting that will continue. Um, Anything that gives students the opportunity to think more broadly and think more creatively, I think is good. And I think we have the opportunity to do that. I think the new curriculum will help a little bit, but I do think that breadth and that creativity and along with that the opportunity to fail, and to realize that's not disastrous. I think that would make this place even better.
I was really happy to hear you talk about the commitment to socioeconomic diversity. I'm sure you remember the Times or one of these papers kind of threw you guys under the bus when it
I
compared
do.
you to other peers and looked at Pell numbers and all of this. But I understand how those things work. You're going to get clicks when you run with a title like that. You know that you're a target. But I did have a conversation with one of my students who's at Duke, doesn't get any financial aid, but felt like there is a level of wealth, and she used the word entitlement, or almost like a disconnect with how average people live here. Now she's full pay, but she's coming from public school.
Yeah.
And now this is something I hear at a lot of other schools that are at Duke's price point that are highly selective.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something to be said for that?
Oh, I've given that a decent amount of thought over the last several years, and yes, I think at certainly at Duke and at schools like Duke, there will, for the foreseeable future at least, be a cohort of students that have come from communities and families and schools that are very well resourced, where the expectations are that they will attend schools like Duke, similar to Duke, and that makes up a part of the student body at Duke and at other similar places. And I've noticed that as I've looked at other colleges, that's part of what you find at well-resourced private universities in the United States now, and I think there's truth to that, and I think that it when we read applications, and we can talk more about this if you want. When we read applications, one of the things that we talk about at the beginning of every year is understanding students and student accomplishments within the context of their particular circumstances. And so we don't have an absolute scale for assessing a student's curriculum, for example. It's always relative to what's available at their school. And that's, we want to make sure that we're responding to a student's accomplishments, not simply the resources that they've had. But it's those things overlap a lot, and it's important to try to understand how they are different. But yes, and I think that we certainly want to make sure that the community at Duke, that the student community at Duke is not just all of one kind of student, because I don't think that's good for anybody, and I don't think it's good for society.
On Thursday's episode, Vince and I will continue our conversation about an article that appeared in the New York Times by Stephanie Saul entitled "Lawsuit Accused Elite Colleges of Admitting Students Solely Based on Wealth." Our question from listeners from Alex, a student, and Alex wants to know, what do colleges mean when they say they have a no-harm standardized testing policy? And Hillary and I will answer that question. And it's great because both Colorado College and Connecticut College, and that's Hillary and Andy, who are in our co-host team, they both utilize a do no harm standardized testing policy. So you will hear from the admission officer that works with a do no harm testing policy every day. Then we'll have our final part of my 3-part interview with Rob Franek, editor-in-chief of the Princeton Review, on how you can use Princeton Review's 168,000 surveys to understand the culture of the colleges your student is applying to. For our College Spotlight, Kevin Newton is back for part 2 of 4 in a series he is doing entitled Safe Universities Abroad. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.